I think it's been hard.
This year's been a challenge. We're all concerned.
All right, we're going to get the meeting started, and we always start our meeting out by a moment of silence, and we'll follow that with the Pledge of Allegiance. Moment of silence, we think of those who innocent victims of crimes and those men and women that protect us here and abroad. Follow that up with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk Chadwick, we have a call.
Commissioner Joel? Here. Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner McDonald?
Here.
Commissioner Musa?
Here.
Commissioner Nelson? Here. Commissioner Yukovich? And Chair Commissioner Boyle?
Here. Before we get going, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Nelson. This is in his district to have a welcome from McDavitt Town Hall.
Thank you, Chair Commissioner Boyle. First of all, to my fellow county board members, have you ever heard the pledge done better at a county board meeting than it was just done here today? Thank you all for joining in and doing that. I would like to take just a moment to introduce, I believe, one of the longest serving township officers that we have in St. Louis County. We're in the beautiful McDavitt Township Hall here, and I would like to introduce Jim Fisher. Supervisor Fisher.
Supervisor Fisher. He never ages.
Go.
We'll have you here because we'll get you on tape.
Thank you for that. Is this on?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that, Keith. I'm still alive. I mean, most people, if they want to die, you have to die to get out of office. But I want to welcome you, by the residents of McDavitt Township, to the board meeting here. We're happy to have you come. As you know, McDavitt this is our history. We've written 2 books on the history of ours, and we have more material to do another one, but there's nobody around anymore that is willing to do it. This is the largest town hall in St. Louis County. 10,000 square feet with another addition on it. Clinton thought they had the biggest, but they're 10 feet short. But we were a township of Finns, basically, and everything is wooded in now. When I was a kid growing up, it was all fields and farms. And as we go into the future, it's going to get worse for all townships and that. So we have to fight for what we can keep. As everybody knows, one of our famous people was Bobby Arrow, and I think everybody in this country must have a Bobby Arrow sign already because they keep getting stolen and replaced. But we're proud to have had, I grew up just down the road from him, so I knew him most of my life. But other than that, I want to thank you for coming here. In fact, we have more St. Louis River than any township. We got 35 miles of river in our township. And when the river's high, you can do it in 8 hours. If it's low, it takes you 12 hours. So, but anyway, thank you for coming here, and have a good board meeting.
Thank you. We'll let you on the pass with that Penn State jacket on, too. Next up, we're going to have employee and retiree longevity recognition, and we'll start it out with Commissioner Nelson. Or, I'm sorry, Commissioner McDonald.
Thank you, Chair Boyle. We are proud to recognize some retirees, longtime retirees. Mary Anderson, Planning and Development. Sharon Chadwick in the Attorney's Office. Victor Kylanen in Land and Minerals. Like I said, I always thought it was Mark, but his real name was Victor. James Larcher from Environmental Services. Tony Manilow from Public Works. Dwayne Meyer from Public Works. Donna O'Connor from Environmental Services. Gene Saline from Property Management. And Donna Sokolowski from Public Health and Human Services. And with us today is the last retiree from the Linden Grove office. We welcome Karen Perkovich.
So you get to come up, because you're getting special recognition for being here today.
Next up, we'll have Commissioner Nelson with years of service.
Thank you, Chair Commissioner Boyle. For 25 years of service, we have John Backman, Sheriff's Department, Carrie Bragg from Public Health and Human Services, John Muvich from the Land and Minerals Department, Lisa Niemi from Public Health and Human Services, and Rachel Koivunen is with us here today. Please come forward, Rachel. A special note, Rachel really had to drive a long ways to get here today, okay? Being you're between McDavitt and Clinton Township, right? You're in Clinton.
Cherry Township.
Cherry Township, okay. Good farm family, I might add, from Cherry Township.
Good at softball, too.
Good at softball, too. Girls softball, okay? And one of our employees is the coach of that team, by the way. Also a cousin of mine. So, but for 30 years, we have one Angela Enroth, okay? And she's not with us today. So, once again.
Okay, at this time, citizens will be allowed to address the board on items not on the agenda. Speakers will have 5 minutes to speak on each item. Please address the board as a whole, not individually. First up, we have Scott Dane. Mr. Dane. Have you introduce yourself and your address, please?
Good morning. My name is Scott Dane. I'm the Executive Director of the Associated Contract Loggers and Truckers of Minnesota. My address is 3961 Barker Road South, Gilbert, Minnesota. Before I get started with what I want to talk about, Jim, what's the name of that song that Bobby Arrow did? Shack on number 7 or whatever it was? Highway number 7, thank you. I was over in Finland a few years back with Ponzi on some timber issues, and there was a musician over there who was playing some of his songs. The only song he could sing in English was that song. But this morning I wanted to talk to you about the proposed elk introduction. And from the logging perspective, I would like to go on the record and say that we are opposed to this. We've been down this road many times before. We know where it goes. It sounds great on the surface, but eventually it will have an impact on logging. At least that's our concern. As an example, you've got the, right now in St. Louis County, there are restrictions on when we can log on certain roads because it's the turtle mating season. And so we can't go out there and work. The long-eared bat situation, there's concern about that. And they're being killed by a fungus However, because they breed or have their roosts in dead trees, there's been a lot of talk about restricting logging operations during that period of time as well. So it's just going to be a matter of time before the Friends of something or other, or the Save This or That, uses the elk as another means to stop logging operations in St. Louis County. So that being said, we'd prefer we don't bring in the elk because it will have a negative impact at some point, mark my words, on future logging. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jim Hoffsummer. Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. I'm Jim Hoffsummer from Markham. I'm the chairman of the Colvin Town Board. And I also would like to comment on the proposed reintroduction of elk. On the surface, this sounds like a great idea. I'm sure a lot of people will be excited about it. I like wildlife, but I'm sure most of you do too. And it'd make a great picture with the elk standing on a mine dump with the sunset behind him. People would just go crazy over that. However, I'm just wondering how many people have thought of some of the repercussions of this. These are big critters. They're 700, 800 pounds. You get a herd of these running around. It's like a herd of buffalo run you over when they come by. In other areas of the country, it might be a good idea. The Rocky Mountains, there's no people, there's no roads, there's no fences. Quite appropriate. For here, we've got farms, we've got fences, we've got roads everywhere, and a lot of people, and it's going to cause all kinds of problems that I'm not sure has been thought through very properly. Anybody that knows me knows I'm not real hot on extensive environmental studies. A lot of time and money is wasted on these, but if there ever was a worthy cause, we should have an environmental impact statement for bringing elk into the area, because there's going to be a lot of problems down the road from this. I would like to mention one thing. I hear there's been some studies done and polls taken about who thinks this is a good idea, Fond du Lac people, Duluth, etc. However, I'd like to point out this is a rural issue. These elk are not going to be downtown Virginia, Hibbing, and Duluth. They're going to be out in the rural areas, the townships and outlying areas of the county. And the people that live there are going to have to deal with this. The people in town, it's not going to affect them hardly at all. So any poll or survey taken, those people in town ought to be automatically disqualified. It'd be about as relevant as having a county-wide poll on whether all of the alleys in downtown Duluth should be resurfaced. That's a city issue. It doesn't affect us out in the country, and elk is the opposite thing of that. There's all kinds of other issues, of course. I know a couple of people that have raised elk and had a nice time doing that. However, the Board of Animal Health, the DNR, and everybody was out. Everyone else was out there regularly checking on one thing and another, testing for disease. And after a while, it got to be just such a circus that they gave it up. Wild elk are going to be the same thing. Who's going to do all this checking and testing there? Or how much should be done, and what kind of disease are they going to be carrying around the countryside? We just had a board meeting at my township here a week ago. We meet once a month. At our next meeting, I am going to introduce a resolution for our town board to oppose this idea. And also at our St. Louis County Association meeting this week, I'm going to bring it up. And I would suggest that the county board, as it deals with this issue, also oppose this reintroduction plan. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Tony Zupancic.
Sure, I'm going to first hand out a few things, a resolution from our St. Louis County Livestock Association, pass around between yourselves.
Tony, I actually sent those out for you. Okay?
You did?
I did, but those can be for the public too, okay? But I did send both of them out And I also have a copy of the State Cattlemen's Association.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'm sorry to say that I can't hear very well right now. I got a problem the last week or so. But what I'd like to talk about is the members of our St. Louis Valley Livestock Association. We're about 98 members strong. And what we're concerned about is the elk coming into our area. And you never really consulted with any of the people that it affects, and it affects area farmers. We just went through a deal with TB that was started up in the Northwest where there was elk. And our whole state was quarantined for a number of years. We couldn't ship any cattle out of state. And over the years, we were able to progressively eliminate all the TB through testing and stuff like elimination of herds. So this will affect the area farmers greatly. And what we're looking at as far as field and pastures, so that they can consume about 3% of their body weight per day. We have enough problem with deer as it is. Now we're going to have elk added into the situation. So as area farmers, we're opposed. That's why we made a resolution for this. And we personally have one of our members' wives that was hit by a deer with a motorcycle. And she's still having a tremendous amount of problems. So you imagine hitting a 150-pound deer versus an 800-900-pound elk. So it's a very concerning thing to our members of what can happen as far as safety and then our livelihood. Most of our farmers here, we're small farmers. We don't have a whole lot of money. And myself, it's just a supplement to my retirement and that. So if we lose our credibility, our TB credibility, we can no longer ship cattle throughout this, out of state regulations, areas and stuff like that. So that's all I have for you guys right now. And I'm sorry I can't hear very well, so I can't speak very well, and I'm kind of following out very gracefully at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Tom Schroeder.
Tom Schroeder, farm over on Highway 16. And my concern is the damage they'll cause and all the expense will be coming from us to benefit people who figure they'll get a chance to hunt. Right now, very few of the farmers have to carry a crop insurance. But if you bring the elk in and they start ruining your hayfields and that and wreck your fences, you'll have to carry the crop insurance to get reimbursed. And every time you turn in a claim, your premiums will go up, and your next claim, they'll pay a less percent. And I know the DNR or whatever claims that there'll be just a limited number of them. But my thought is you got to go according to what they do, not what they say. Because Kitson County, they were told they'd have a herd of roughly 50. They're going to have licenses for 27 this year, and you subtract 27 from 160 some, that doesn't get anywhere near 50. And I think it's just the DNR sponsoring something that financially it won't be a benefit to anybody other than maybe someone who's selling hunting gear to a lucky few that might get a license. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Troy Sulzer.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of the livestock associations and also in relationship to agriculture in northeastern Minnesota. My name is Troy Sulzer, and I work as an extension educator here in St. Louis County and work with many of the farmers in this region in regards to things like this. One of the components of my work is to be a part of the depredation process of wolf predation. And so when animals are killed by wolves, that process is investigated. If it's deemed that the animal has been killed by wolves, That information goes to Minnesota Department of Ag, and in that process, the value is assigned to each of those animals that is killed by wolves. That is my activity, or one of my components of what I am involved with. On the statewide basis, so far this year, there's been 115 claims, and as part of that process, it gives me the opportunity to also be part of the elk predation issues that occur in northwestern Minnesota. So up to date, 115 in relationship to wolves across the state. Elk to date is the difference of 394 total claims, minus that 115 to date. And so with that in mind, it's a tremendous amount of impact that is occurring. Tom had mentioned the aspect of using crop insurance. In our area, we have probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4% of the farmers that carry crop insurance in regards to our forage crops and our row crops. Very, very small percent. And part of that is because we have seasonal changes and the variability of production of forage crops, we really never have the opportunity to utilize that crop insurance. And so you may carry it, but very few ever get any claims made upon them. We had Tony present in relationship to TB. TB has been something that was very dramatic. We saw approximately a 30 cent per pound decline in our beef prices when that occurred back in about 2012. It took us multiple years to get back the TB-free status. That process stemmed from the Grigola-Gatsky-Skyme area, which has a herd of elk present in that region. And the concern of that cross-contamination between the bovine species, the sheep species, any of the ruminant species, in addition to a spread within the wild population of deer as well, concerns me in relationship to that. And finally, if we look at chronic wasting disease, mad cow disease as some term it, if we think back of when that occurred back in 2003, that black swan event, I will never forget during Christmas holiday, with that cow being identified, we saw approximately a 40% decrease in value of our animals at that point. That was in Washington State. It had nothing to do with our local community, but yet an immediate impact of 40%. That sort of impact, when margins are so tight in agriculture as it is, a 40% decline can easily cause many of our farmers to go out of business. So with these items, I'd be willing to visit with any of you further in regards to specific components of that at any point. And with that, I appreciate your time for allowing me to present.
Thank you. Dan Johnson.
Good morning, Commissioners. I appreciate the time to speak on the elk issue with you. Most of you know me as the chairperson of the Recreation Cabin Lease Association. We have approximately 680 leases within St. Louis County. About 8 to 12 people utilize each lease. That's by my own estimation. I also come to you as a landowner and a resident within the Cloquet Valley. 130 acres I'm an owner of. And the first thing, you know, when I'm a little nervous about this, but when we received a survey from the University of Minnesota, on the surface it was, hey, this might be a pretty good idea. I'd love to see an elk. I mean, I'm an elk hunter. I love wildlife. I I go out to the west, I like to see elk, I like to see other animals, it's great. But then, when I started looking at the survey, I said, this is about as silly as the $2 bill they sent me to fill it out. Yeah, they sent me $2. Send this back. And I wish I would have brought the $2 bill with me. I'm going to frame it, I think. So our association, we met at our annual meeting in April of 2018, and we discussed the issue, and I'm going to give you the letter that I sent to Professor Fulton, who they ignored us. Okay. Why, I'm not sure, because when I spoke with the biologist a year later, inviting him to come to our meeting in 2019, spoke with him in probably January, maybe a year ago, and I said, Mr. Schrade, I'm sure you're aware of our organization. We've taken a position, and his first response was, who are you? And I explained again, I said, well, I sent you this letter, told you who we were. He says, yeah, I don't know anything about you. So, yeah, they ignored us. When I talked to my teenage daughter about this, who hunts with me in our group, and she says, well, why would they want to do this? And I said, what do you mean? She says, well, this is an invasive species. There has never been elk in St. Louis County by their own study. Never, ever. And they're touting it as a reintroduction of elk into Minnesota or St. Louis County. No, that's not true. That's false. The area is currently CWD free, and they're known to carry CWD. Why would we introduce an invasive species when we spend millions of dollars trying to prevent it? The Cloquet Valley State Forest is under a managed trail plan, which this board endorsed, passed a resolution when the Minnesota DNR said, we want you to come up with a plan, a trail plan. The St. Louis County Land Department was out there surveying trails. Our organization was involved in the process. It was, you had your choice. You can either have a closed forest, which means everything's off limits pretty much. You can have a limited trail plan, which is trails are only open as posted. If it's unmarked, you can't use it. Or a managed plan, which means we're going to let you locally determine where is the best use of this forest. And trails are open unless they're posted closed. If there's wetlands, other issues, you have the authority to close a trail, but right now it's open and managed. That's what the people wanted. You introduce elk in here, we're going to have to protect another species, which is going to change an already endorsed management plan of the trail system within St. Louis County's, the Cloquet Valley State Forest. Part of the, how we recreate in the forest, I'm a skier, and I'm here with two hats. I'm here as a landowner, homeowner. I reside in the district or in the forest, and chairperson of the organization. I ski, I hike, I hunt, I ATV, I snowmobile. Pretty much what a lot of people in this county do as recreation time. We don't want to see a negative impact on how we already use the forest. Elk and deer have coexisted in other areas, but within the forest, the results really are unknown. We can study it all we want, but it's an unknown. Consensus in our group is the deer herd could be better managed, so let's focus on that. We have that. Introducing elk would not be a positive impact on deer because, we talk about the different size of these animals, and, we have people from the land, Mr. Weber is here. years ago, we talked about with our area land manager about how deer browse and the cedar within the Cloquet Valley, and there's a lot of cedar around my place. The cedar are all browsed at a height about this high. That's where a deer can browse. We're going to introduce elk. Those cedars are going to be browsed up here. And that's just going to happen. They've got to eat something. It's no secret that the moose population in northeastern Minnesota is on the decline. The Minnesota DNR stopped allowing moose hunts after the 2012 hunting season, yet certain natives, tribes, including Fond du Lac, continue to kill moose annually. In 2019, there were 60 moose hunting permits available to the tribal hunters. Introducing elk, why would that be any different than moose? I don't think that we can envision a logical management plan from a hunting perspective, even if we're thinking in future generations, because look what happened to the moose. We're losing our moose. The elk will not remain, and I'm going to ask one of my follow-ups, Mr. Baraboo, will you defer some time to me? Is that allowed?
You just want Mr. Baraboo to speak for Mr. Baraboo?
Well, can he defer like 2 minutes to my time?
All right, I gave you already 2 minutes after that, but, well, if you could wrap it up now,
okay.
We'll give you that.
The elk aren't going to stay in specific areas, but they're going to migrate to food and cover sources. Vehicle collisions are going to result in injury and death. Millions of dollars are spent annually to keep these out, or keep out non-invasive species. It's going to be millions more to manage. And if you want to give me $300,000 to conduct a public survey, I'll give you a result different than what they found. And I'm also going to show you, or give you a copy of the letter that we had ignored.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next up, we have Mr. Charles Baraboo.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I want to thank you very much for allowing me to speak. For some full disclosure, first of all, I'm a city councilor in the city of Virginia for 26 years. I'm also vice president of the Range Association, Municipalities and Schools. I'm also on the ARD Commission board, just so you know. And I'm not coming to speak as a member of any one of these. I'm coming here as a leaseholder with the St. Louis County Lease and a hunter. I've been hunting for over 50 years. First of all, your survey that was put out, not your survey, the survey is put out by the state and by the biologists, is totally flawed. Number one, when you figure the numbers that Dan was talking about for members in the Hunting Shack Association, those are seasonal leases. None of the seasonal leaseholders got a survey, none of us, unless you were a landowner in that particular area. That amounts to between 5,600 and 7,000 individuals in these hunting leases of over 680. That is a really flawed survey when you compare the numbers and the percentages of these surveys. Going back in history, my father was born in 1902 in Ely, Minnesota, and spent lots of time across the northeastern part of St. Louis County. He said there was not one elk during his time in the early 1900s when he turned a young enough man to go through this process. He said there were woodland caribou, there were mountain lions, etc., but not an elk. And your own maps, or the maps that are shown, show there is nothing from International Falls until south of Duluth that there was ever elk here that they can verify. So your restoration is not a restoration, it's an introduction of the elk to this area. I have another huge concern, the Cloquet Valley Forest, that looks like from the study, and I've read this whole big study and looked at it carefully. is going to be a conflict area because the DNR has put a hunting zone there called 132, which is designed to increase the moose population within that Cloquet Valley Forest. They've already done restrictions on how you can hunt that, and that is right across the highway for my hunting lease is. I'm in the Cloquet Valley Forest. That conflict between moose and elk is not good. You can end up with a disease process that Dan was talking about throughout this issue, and you're going to have competition where the moose population is already down. They're trying to restore it, and that is a restoration to get it back to where it was so we can eventually hunt those particular species. Also, Dan talked about the ATV and UTV trails. How many of you are familiar with the border-to-border that they're looking at for these trails? They just built a $2 million bridge up across the Vermilion River to accomplish this, and they want to go border-to-border with this particular recreational activity that would increase the tourism in Minnesota. You're seeing more and more of the ATVs across, and we need these trails. And my concern is they've done this in the past when they first came out and marked trails many years ago. I had logging trails on the property area that I hunt with my lease. They came and tagged those as open trails. They never came back and untagged them, so I keep them open, and which is legal because they've never untagged those. What do you think will happen when you have recreational problems between the elk and these ATVs? They're going to close these trails. So that defeats your tourism process. The last thing I'm concerned about, and I'm going to tell you this, I just participated with 2 of my grandchildren in this 4-day hunt to increase the amount of hunters that the DNR expects will happen when they give these free things out. I did not see, and neither did my grandchildren, we saw 0 deer in this area, and it's been that way because of the timber wolves that have been there. I had 8 of them in there last year in that whole area, and I've got pictures of 4 of them together on cameras. So what do you think is going to happen to your elk and the young elk? They're going to be fodder for the moose or the wolves. Simple as that. The young, you see it in the videos that they show out west, where they chase them down, kill them, and whatever else it is. So I am definitely in the same boat, and I'm on the board of directors for the Hunting Shack Association. We have 1 member from each of your commission slots, 1 through 7, that are on that board. And we represent a large area, but not sending any surveys out to us is the biggest issue that I have in this particular area. And I think I already told you I've been hunting for over 50 years. I'm 73 years old now, and I'm still healthy, and I'm still going to continue to hunt until my kids have to drag the wheelchair to the stand. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jim Takala.
Good morning. I'm Jim Takala. We have a dairy farm about on 9281 Highway 37, about 7 miles north of here. We started in 1922. Obviously, I'm the 3rd generation, and we have a 4th generation coming up that's 33 and employed full-time on our dairy after he graduated from the University of Minnesota with a degree in animal science. We have about 380 dairy cows, 350 heifers, and my son-in-law has about 130 beef cattle. So economic impacts against the introduction of elk is my primary concern. So it's about 860 head. We have 4 full-time employees and 8 part-time employees. We also have about 1.5 miles of frontage on State Highway 37, and I'm worried about the damage that elk could cause by going through fences and with these cattle getting onto State Highway 37 that has 3,500 to 4,000 cars and trucks a day, and there could be damage to health and safety to my cattle and also to people. It's pretty high risk there. And the draw to elk in our area, they will never stay within their specified range. They'll wander out and spread, is we make about 1,500 acres of high-quality forages and alfalfa for our dairy cattle and 500 acres of pasture. And we make about 5,000 round bales of hay, so that those are all big draws that they've got to eat something. They'll eat alfalfa before they'll eat the cedar. And so the health impacts, particularly on TB, could be very major to us. Just yesterday, we sent some cattle, a potload or a semi-load of dairy cows to Saskatchewan. So that's exporting cattle. And we had to go through extensive testing on TB and brucellosis with the state vet and get permits from the federal vet. And they had to get unloaded at the border when they crossed and get scanned and inspected and approved. So that TB would just shut that right down, shipping any cattle to Canada. And it's a good market for us. It's probably $300 a head more than you could get within the state of Minnesota, and we sent 35. Impact of introducing invasive species, which elk are. I mean, caribou, they may be looked at, but the problem with those are that the wolves will eat them all in. So it's just invasive species like wild turkeys have come in, been introduced, and they cause problems for guys planting crops. They go down the rows of corn that have been planted and eat all the seed, and they have sparse crops. And they also get on top of silage bales that we make along rows of forages that are encased in that, and they penetrate that, pick at it, and make holes in it and allow oxygen to get in there and damage that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Roger Sabin?
Good morning. I'm Roger Sabin. I'm a livestock producer over in the Hibbing area, and my concern with the elk is basically the forage problem and the TB problem. Raising about 200 acres of alfalfa, if they get into it, the cost to reseed and everything runs about $400 an acre, which is pretty costly for a small livestock producer. And the TB problem that I've had is back when we had the TB scare, I had animals sold to both North Dakota and Wisconsin. Those sales were stopped. Those producers in those states found somebody else to get animals in their own states, because all of our surrounding states refuses to let us export from Minnesota into these other states. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the end of our list. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on items not on the agenda? Please come up. We'll have you write your name and your address at the front there for clerk, and then introduce yourself, please.
Okay. Okay, my name's Dan Radke. I live in District 4. I used to raise elk. This is not a good idea. It's not economically, you'll never do it. But I do have other problems too. Not only is it not economically feasible for the state to do this, and I'm gonna end up paying for it, but in raising elk, I was regulated out of business by the state. I mean, you had to tag every calf, and if you didn't, you got fined. You had to test every calf. I think I still have a chute, or my brother does, because we did it together. And then when the TB came,
you could not move them in and out of the state. You couldn't sell them, and that was the only way to make money, was to raise 6x6 bulls and ship them to Texas or some shooting ranch that somebody rich could actually buy these and shoot them on a preserve. So you're not going to make money unless you can charge $1,000, or I mean, $5,000 for that animal because it's a trophy animal. And you're not going to do that up here without. The other thing is that when we raised them, we fenced in our best hayfield, the best hayfield. Where are the elk going to go? They're going to go to the farmers' hayfields. I think it's very hypocritical of the state to regulate a private person out of business where they will not do the same things and take care of that herd the same way that we had to. And they would come and say, if they get out, you can be sued. If they cause damage, you can be sued. Use the vote for this bill. Can I sue you personally? Are you going to take responsibility? Oh, no. It's again, we'll use my money. This is a money pit that we shouldn't go down. It's not a good deal. But if you want to sign the paper and take personal responsibility so that you can personally be sued, have at her. I wasn't willing to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak on the matter? Please come up, sir. I'll have you sign your name and address and introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Thomas Beauregard. My address is 3227 Lady Nicole Lane. I am with the Leaseholders Association, representative of District 1. I would like to go on record as a citizen and as a leaseholder opposed to any introduction of an elk. I stand with loggers and farmers. Why would we want to make it any harder for them to raise families and pay their taxes? So I just want to say I'm opposed to that. And I'm in a lease with 4 other people, and we're all opposed to that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak?
Thank you, Commissioners, for the opportunity to
I'll
talk
sign
to you guys. I'll sign in here. I'm also, my name is Tim Ferdon. I live in the city of Rice Lake now, the former Rice Lake Township. And I also have a cabin in Cloquet Valley, a hunting shack lease cabin in the Cloquet Valley State Forest. So I'd like to kind of reiterate just some of the things that Dan and a few of the other members has brought up, and a few other things. And we are all mostly opposed to the introduction of elk in the Cloquet Valley Forest. I recently had a chance to speak with DNR wildlife person in Duluth District, Martha Minshak, and she also sits on a board of international supervisors, scientists that study the moose, and I found out that the elk suffer the same diseases as the moose do. I didn't know that they also get brainworm. And some of she is opposed as well. Some of her Canadian counterparts have asked her, you know, why the Minnesota DNR would even consider such a thing. You know, it's going to be costly, and most of our members of the Shack Association wonder, you know, do we really want our additional tax dollars to go to this project? In the light of the fact that we have a deer population that is hard to manage, and a wolf population that seems like it's unmanageable, at least until maybe our federal legislature figures out what they're going to do with the future of wolf management in the state of Minnesota. That's a big concern that we wonder, you know, how an elk population could survive with the wolves and the bear predation. So again, I thank you for an opportunity to speak, and would just like to say that we are all, most of the membership of the St. Louis County Hunt and Shack Association is opposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak? Please come up.
My name is Jeff Wilmot. I live at 411 Summit Avenue in Proctor. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I've listened to everybody speak, and I'm in total agreement. I'm against introduction of elk just on the pure economics of it. I don't see how we can possibly afford it when we're trying to take care of the moose and deer that we already have. It just seems like a senseless venture. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Today I'm not here as Commissioner Nelson, I'm here as Keith Nelson, farmer from Vale Township. I decided a long time ago that becoming a commissioner did not mean I had to give up my rights as a citizen in this county, and my rights to speak on behalf of farmers and to speak on behalf of my own family. Folks, I've been to Kitson County. I've seen what it's done in Kitson County. I've seen what it's done to agriculture in Kitson County. I've talked to beef farmers in Kitson County that have just simply given up, turned their land over to CRP because it's not worth the fight to have your fences torn down once a week, to have elk come in and devastate your crops that you're raising so that you can feed your beef herd. I'm a third generation beef farmer. And like most of the people in this room, we're not big. We're not big. So we get ignored. We do have some people like Mr. Takala who, you know, they run one of 2 or 3 dairy farms in the entire county. They're big. They make their living off of their farm. But most of us are little guys like me. And I don't mean little in stature, Commissioner McDonald. I mean little. 20, 30 cows, trying to supplement the income that we make in other areas. Or in my case, you know, I don't hit golf balls around a field. I don't fish much. I raise cows. That's what I do for a hobby. But just because we do it for a hobby does not mean that somebody should be able to come in and introduce animals into our area that, one, are going to devastate the crops that we raise, two, are going to introduce diseases into this area that we currently do not have. Their own study, Fond du Lac's own study done by the University of Minnesota, their own study says that those animals are not likely to stay in the Cloquet Valley. Their own study talks about the fact that we should not be introducing CWD into an area that does not have it. That's in their own study on page 29. I sent you all copies of it. Folks, we have some decisions to make here. And it does not just involve the wild herd, it also involves the herds that are being raised in this county in pens. Because we have a duty to protect what we have. And not to be looking for that panacea, that end of the rainbow, where, folks, we can have everything. The reality is we can't. We are lucky. This county is lucky to have the resources we have. And the survey, I got to tell you, I have yet to talk to one individual that got the survey that took the time to fill it out that lives in a rural area. I've talked to people that got it. And then I went back and I said to myself, you know, I wonder why those farmers didn't fill out the survey. If I had gotten one, I'd likely have filled it out. Read halfway through the survey, they want to know how much money I make annually. Now, if somebody can tell me what that has to do with the reintroduction of elk into the Cloquet Valley, I would like to know. Please look at the study and look at what that survey entailed. Or if you didn't make enough money, maybe your survey got thrown out. I don't know. I don't know. Why are they asking the question? If you went through that list of questions, you had to ask on most of them, why are they asking the question? What does my income have to do with the fact that you're going to introduce elk and potentially TB and CWD into this area? Later on in this meeting, I'll shift gears and I'll be a commissioner and I'll talk to you about what I intend to bring forward. For now, I'm just a farmer. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, for those items listed on the board agenda or committee of the whole agenda, citizens will be allowed to address the board at the time a motion is on the floor. Commissioners, we have the consent agenda in front of us.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Jewell, second by Commissioner McDonald. Commissioner comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Consent passes. On to the regular agenda. First up, under Health and Human Services, the authorization for 2 full-time employee positions for Minnesota Senior Health Options, Minnesota Senior Care Plus programs.
I'll move it.
Moved by Commissioner Jewell, second by Commissioner Nelson. Administration.
Thank you, Chair Boyle and Commissioners. The action before the board is to authorize the expansion of complement to support our Minnesota Health Options, Minnesota Senior Care Plus programming that is outsourced to us by 2 carriers, UCare and Blue Plus. We had a good discussion on this and the increasing caseload that is pushing for the need for additional workers to support these programs. These programs are largely fully reimbursed by the carriers. One action item that came up and was a commitment by administration was to include a additional resolved that authorized that these positions go away when and if the funding is jeopardized or eliminated. And that has been included. So there's no change to the resolution with the exception of adding a resolve further that the positions go away if and when the carrier reimbursement is not adequate to support our services. So if there are other questions, we stand at the ready. And again, the action is to add 2 positions to meet our caseload.
What's your comments? Commissioner Nelson.
Mr. Chair, with the addition of my support obviously is with the addition of the resolve further. And it's been a policy of this board for awfully long time that when the monies go away, the positions also go away with it. So stand in support.
Other commissioners? Seeing none, we'll move this to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next up, commissioners, we have Environment and Natural Resources, special sale of state tax forfeited land to Pequon Township to be used for public burn pile and tree clipping area and to provide land for walking running trail. Do I have someone move it?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner, second by Commissioner Nelson. Administration.
Thank you, Chair Boyle. Commissioners, the action before the board is to authorize the sale of tax forfeited land to Pequon Township. There is discussion about sale versus conveyance or other easement or conditional use aid usage in further discussion with the township, with Commissioner McDonald. This is in the best interest of the township. It's supported by their letter that is attached to the resolution, and this appears to be in the best interest of the township, as I noted, and of course works for us as the manager of the state tax forfeited land. So the action before the board again is to approve the sale in the amount of $5,100 plus fees to Pequon Township.
Commissioner comments? Commissioner McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to thank Director Weber for the good work on this with the communication with Pequon. I know they've been looking for an area to do this with the budworm problem that they have and the burning that they were looking for an area to do, and this just alleviates that fear of fire up in Pequon Township. So thanks, Director Weber, for your help in this, and this is a great step for us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other commissioners? Seeing none, we'll move this to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Last up, commissioners, we have emergency purchase for services from G-Men Environmental Services.
I would move it.
We got to suspend the rules first, sir, Commissioner.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For recycle.
I move to suspend the rules.
All right, we have that. Let me read the rest of it. For recycled materials haulage, processing, marketing, and recycling facility operations for the period starting October 1st, 2019 through November 30th, 2019. Commissioner Nelson, this has not been on the committee. Commissioner Nelson asked to suspend the rules. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jewell. All those in favor of suspending the rules, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is now to the board. Do I have a motion?
May I move it now, Mr. Chair? I apologize for my earlier.
Commissioner Nelson, move it. Do I have Commissioner Musoff to second it? Administration.
Thank you, Chair Boyle and Commissioners. First of all, for suspending the rules. Unusual circumstances here that required entering into an emergency purchase. We are at the same time also having longer-term discussions, but our first priority was to ensure the continuous and smooth operation of our recycling services at the Virginia site. So the action before the board is to authorize a temporary 60-day emergency purchase for services from G-Men Environmental Services to support our recycling operations. The period of the contract is 60 days. Again, we will have further discussions about a longer-term fix, if you will. As we approach the end of August and September, we had a lot of discussions with the former operator of Green Forest, who actually had a contract through the end of next year with options. But for a number of reasons, they're unable to sustain the commitment to the contract. This necessitated us taking the action to ensure we had a contingency plan to have a contiguous and ongoing operations of the facility. I want to thank our Director of Purchasing for her help and support, and our Director of Environmental Services for his efforts in reaching out and ensuring that we have continuity of operations. So the contract before the board for the 60-day period is in the amount of $160,000. We are actively negotiating a longer-term fix and solution as we speak.
And with that, with your permission, Mr. Chair, I would have Director St. Lawrence talk a little bit about the background. I think he's had the occasion to meet with most of the commissioners individually or collectively, and this is a good outcome under the circumstances.
Thank you, Administrator Gray, Chair Boyle, and Commissioners. I think Kevin did an excellent job in summarizing the circumstances resulting in the emergency purchase request. I'd just like to add that since that took place on October 1st, the transition from Green Forest to Zimm couldn't have run smoother, and as Kevin had highlighted, the customers of the Environmental Services Department and all St. Louis County, the citizens that we serve within our solid waste management area, have experienced absolutely no interruption in services with the change in contractors. At this time, I'd be glad to answer any questions that the board may have regarding this request. If not, I would greatly appreciate your consideration in approving the emergency request for us. And just finally, I'd like to personally thank Donna and Jim Nephew, our Assistant County Attorney, for the efforts and the time they put in making this transition as smooth as it possibly could have been. So, again, thank you. But if there are any questions, I'd be glad to entertain them at this time.
Any questions for Director Salmons?
Mr. Chair, not a question.
Thank you, Director Salmons.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Commissioner Boyle. Look, I jotted a note here to our board chair that this represents about 3 years worth of some pretty interesting times and some hard work on behalf of both our Environmental Services Director and our Purchasing Director, along with their staffs, quite frankly. The result of this, and I couldn't be happier to have this emergency contract in place, because we found a local contractor that pays a livable wage with union drivers, so that we know we're not going to be changing drivers every other week, and consequently, when you change drivers every other week, drivers go out and don't know where the bins are, or don't know where this is, or, oh, geez, I forgot that one. Well, those bins fill up pretty fast. We are fortunate in northern St. Louis County to have what I believe is one of the best recycling programs here in the state of Minnesota. And that recycling program relies on good operators. And I think we've found ourselves, at least on an interim basis here, someone who is a very good operator. Again, local Ely boys, we can't hold that against them, Mr. Chair, but they are Ely boys, and they've been around for an awfully long time, and quite frankly, they've also have taken over the operation up at our landfill, and once we're done on this vote, Mr. Chair, I have a little more on that.
Thank you. Other commissioners? Seeing none, I just want to again thank Director St. Lawrence. He's done immense work the last couple of years, and that has not been seen. Everybody recognizes that on this board, so thank you for all your hard work. It has not been easy. That being said, we'll move this to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Commissioners, one last thing, Commissioner Nelson.
Mr. Chair, I looked at this, and as the chair of the solid waste and septic subcommittees for this board, we here in St. Louis County have been so fortunate for so many years to have one operator of our regional landfill. And we recognize our employees all the time when they retire. We recognize people for years of service, and yet here we had a contractor who has been with us for 29 years, and so I'll let Director St. Lawrence fill in the holes on this, but a long time. And he's here with us today, Mr. Chair, and I wanted to take an opportunity from our board, given this gentleman's time with us and his stature within the solid waste community. We have been an example for the state of Minnesota. In fact, he's taught the landfill classes at the state, at the MPCA, as our landfill operator. But Director St. Lawrence, would you care to introduce our retiring landfill operator from a whole lot of years?
Commissioners, it's with great pleasure that I'm allowed to announce that, well, first of all, Bob Kangas has retired a few weeks ago. And I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize Bob for his commitment, dedication, and 28 years and 1 month of service spending that he spent heading up the daily operations for St. Louis County's landfills. Kangas Excavating was started in 1981 by Bob's father, John Sr. The company changed hands in 1985 with the transfer of ownership to John's 3 sons, John Jr., Bob, and their brother Richard. On September 1st, 1991, Kangas Excavating, with Bob at the helm, began landfill operations for St. Louis County at the county's landfill in Hibbing, and continued to oversee those operations until the landfill closed in 1994. The county was so impressed with the services provided by Kangas Excavating that it hired the company to supervise operations at the county's new regional landfill in Virginia when it opened on November 1st, 1993. While his brothers focused on the excavation, construction, and utilities repair and installation side of the business, Bob continued to head up the company's landfill operations division and could usually be found at the landfill for each of the 6 days the landfill was opened, and often on the day that it was closed. Bob leads by example, and his work ethic is second to none. His crew, all 49ers, and Bob were responsible for waste container haulage, facility and site maintenance, equipment maintenance and repair, soil and crushed glass screening, road repair, drainage and erosion control management, excavation for future landfill cells, placement of waste coverage, garbage compaction, mowing and baling of hay in the leachate spray fields, mowing and grading of road shoulders, and snow plowing from the regional landfill, for the regional landfill road from Highway 135 to the landfill, plus the canister and household hazardous waste sites and the recycling facility. Bob made the environmental services directors, both Ted Treline's and my life, very easy. He ran a tight ship and demanded a lot from his employees and a lot from the customers he served. The pride, dedication, and commitment that Bob had for the regional landfill is unquestioned and did not go unnoticed. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has perennially viewed the regional landfill as one of the best, if not the best, managed landfill facilities in the state, and their respect for Bob speaks for itself. For the last 15 years, Bob has taught landfill operations at the MPCA's Landfill Operators Training and Certification classes held around the state. In recent years, Kangas Excavating decided to downsize and focus on landfill operations. Bob's older brother, John, retired about a year ago. Bob's younger brother, Richard, is now heading up landfill waste compaction activities, which includes implementing Bob's compaction techniques that have added additional years to the life of the regional landfill. Earlier this year, Bob decided it was time to retire, and the brothers decided to sell Kangas Excavating. Interested parties included an international solid waste management company, a solid waste company with multiple operations within Minnesota, and several local solid waste management companies. After several meetings with each of the parties, Kangas Excavating agreed to be acquired by G-Men Environmental Services, a local solid waste management company out of Ely. The contract between St. Louis County and Kangas Excavating for landfill operations remains in place. The transition from Kangas Excavating, the brothers, to G-Men has remained absolutely seamless, and the contracts between Kangas Excavating and the county for transfer station haulage, demolition haulage, and operations of the Hibbing Transfer Station also remain intact. Again, I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize Bob for his commitment, dedication, and service to landfill operations for St. Louis County. And it's with great privilege that I'm able to introduce Bob, and I'd like to ask him to stand up. Thank you.
Thank you. Please do.
First of all, I want to thank commissioners present, commissioners past, Administrator Gray, Donna Visco. I have worked with everybody just fantastic. You've got to be proud of this county for what you people have achieved. And I want to make one for Commissioner Lampa. If anybody remembers Commissioner Lampa, he was the one that got me into solid waste. And that was in 1991, the spring of 91. And I know he's looking down, so I want to thank him. Second, I want to thank my crew. Your business is only as good as your crew. They're the ones that got us this far. Their dedication, their work ethic has been phenomenal. I am so proud that they all went to work for G-Men. They all stayed at their jobs. They've made this transition as simple as can be because they know what to do. They've been there. I've got a couple original ones. They've been there 28 years already. So they know what to do. Third, environmental services. I've watched the development of environmental services since it was born. Ted Trelline, Terry Soderberg, Harold Heidla, the three amigos. I worked with them. They were phenomenal. They got this whole thing going. Mark St. Lawrence and Dave Fink. These two fellas have taken this department to an entirely new level, along with all your help, giving them that little bit of advice. But these two fellas are so dedicated, and how far ahead they are thinking of what needs to be done, and their relationships they've made with the MPCA has been phenomenal. There is no doubt in my mind that these two individuals will take this department wherever it needs to go and be efficient at it. So I want to thank them, and I want to thank you, and I'm definitely going to miss the place, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just think it would be appropriate for a photo with Mr. Kangas.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any other commissioner? Commissioner
Mr. Chair,
Nelson?
just before that, I have to tell you that I wanted to do this recognition knowing that I'm also going to enlist Mr. Kangas's help as we move forward on the project that will likely serve all of St. Louis County. It's many years into the future, and if we can keep him off his ultralight, he's going to be around those many years into the future. Okay.
Thank you. Other commissioners? Seeing none, let's move for adjournment and we'll get a picture taken. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion. We are adjourned. We'll have about 5 minutes and take a picture.
29 years, 4 months.
I'm sorry, I just started to get the shakes all the time.
Did you really?
No, kinda.
Looking it over, I'm like,
All right, we'll start the committee of the whole agenda. We'll have Kirk Chapman take roll, please.
Commissioner Jewell? Here. Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner McDonald? Here. Commissioner Musa?
Here.
Commissioner Nelson?
Here.
Commissioner Yudovich? And Chair Commissioner Boyle.
Here. Commissioners, administration, before we start, is there a difference between the two committee of the wholes? I know we had an amended deputy officer.
Just had a revision to one board letter that we apparently missed in reading it, correction, and then we just flopped the two numbers on the environmental committee to make sure they align with the
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, we got the consent agenda in front of us. Moved by Commissioner Nelson, second by Commissioner Jewell. Commissioners, anything to pull? Seeing none, all those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent passes. On to the regular agenda, and first up, we have Finance and Budget. Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Chair Boyle. So the first item we have today for the Finance and Budget Committee is Board Letter Number 19451, which applies to our health and dental plan rates proposed for 2020. I will move it. Do I have support?
Support.
Supported by Commissioner Jewell and Administration. Chair DeFrame.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Olson and Commissioners. The action before the board, as was noted, is to approve our self-insurance rates for the 2020 year, both for employee and retiree medical and dental plans. It also includes a stop-loss insurance coverage fee and other administrative fees. Director Gottschalk is here and can walk through the board letter on behalf of the board and on behalf of administration. I would just note that the insurance committee, while not unanimous, had a very strong dialogue around establishing a 6.5% increase, premium increase, as their recommendation to the board, which administration is adopting as we continue to respond to a volatile, if not rising, health claim market, but also as we look with our forecast, working with the auditor's office towards strengthening our health care fund balance, which we believe this recommendation achieves. So with that, Chair Olson, I'd have Director Gottschalk talk to the details.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Olson, committee members, Jim Gottschalk, Director of HR and Administration. As you know, each year we go through the process of evaluating our annual claims and setting funding for our medical and dental plan for the following year. We follow a pretty historical approach to this. We work very closely with our County Labor Management Health Insurance Committee, and these are individuals that represent different bargaining units and have put a lot of time in over the years to understand how our plan is self-insured, how the plan operates, funding levels, studying trends. So before we get any further, I do want to recognize the representatives in the various bargaining units that participate in the Labor Management Health Insurance Committee, because it's a lot of heavy lifting, it's complex content, and they do great work. So when we look at setting our medical rate recommendation for the board, we consider three things. First of all, we look at what our claims administrator, Blue Cross Blue Shield, anticipates happening for claims for our plan for the following year. We have a fairly large group, over 4,400 members, and so they give a lot of credibility to our own claims experience in making a recommendation or projecting what our claims are going to do for the next year. Earlier in 2019, as early as May, those projections were a little scary. It was over 10% is what they anticipated to see for a claims increase for 2020. In July, that had decreased to just over 8%, and at the meeting we had in September, they projected that the claims increase would be 6.1%. So claims are definitely trending in the right direction for us. The second component that we look at is what is the fund balance in our self-insured medical and dental fund. And at the September meeting, and we looked at the number again in October, the financial report presented by the county auditor indicated about a $8.2 million projected fund balance for the end of 2019. And when insurance industry experts make a recommendation, how healthy should that fund be, they recommend between 4 and 6 months worth of your annual claims. And that's about our $8.2 million fund balance puts us just under 3 months. So we're a little bit below what the comfort level is as recommended by the insurance industry experts. And the third component is the recommendation by the insurance committee members. And we operate under a consensus decision-making model. We did not have a full consensus As far as what the rate recommendation should be, there were numbers that were presented at that meeting in September between 0 and 6.5%, with nearly all of the members agreeing that 6.5% would be an increase to the premium on the medical side that would meet what the trend is. It would result in a slight increase in the fund balance, and it wasn't a number that was going to be overly burdensome to our employees, because both the county and the employees contribute toward the health insurance premium. And I certainly don't want to leave out the retirees who pay 100% of their premium each month. So the rate recommendation on the medical coverage is a 6.5% premium increase as identified by Administrator Gray. Next is the stop loss coverage. So our health plan, even though it is self-insured, we buy insurance to cover us in the instances of really high claims on a contract. Our stop loss threshold is $750,000 per contract. A contract could be a single contract. It could be an entire family contract. In 2018, we did have a case that went over our $750,000 stop loss level. That certainly did not help in us securing a good premium on that third-party insurance. That being said, you'll remember that we went out for bid in 2018, and we negotiated caps on how much our stop loss and our administrative fees could increase by, and the cap on stop loss was 9.5%. And so Blue Cross Blue Shield is quoted us a 9.5% premium increase, and that'll increase the stop loss coverage from $10.70 per contract per month to $11.72 per contract per month. And if you're interested, how much is that compared to what the needed premium would be? That premium is about 44% of what the needed premium would be if you were to just go out and buy stop loss coverage. So we're still getting a great deal from our insurance partner. The other recommendation that we have on the medical coverage is the administrative fee that we pay to our insurance carrier, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Again, we negotiated caps in as part of the RFP process, and the cap amount is 4%, and so that is the amount of the increase. It'll increase from $37.21 per contract per month to $38.70 per contract per month. And over the years, we've worked with consultants to get feedback on, as a percentage of your total claim spend, how much should you be spending on your administrative fee? Because the concern is the insurance company is gouging the health plan. And the insurance experts say 7-8% is reasonable. The 4% increase puts us at just about 2.6% of our annual claims spent. We spend about $34 million a year in total medical claims. So again, St. Louis County has a very favorable insurance administrative fee that we pay to our carrier, which means most of our dollars are going to pay for claims. On the dental side, we had great experience. Whereas we spend $34 million in medical each year, we're spending about $1 million, just a little over $1 million in dental. Dental is a more predictable benefit. It has a cap on the maximum allowed per year per contract. So it's more predictable than the medical. Delta Dental is the claims administrator on the dental coverage. We're still self-insured. The recommendation was a 0% increase on the dental premium for 2020, and that's what we're recommending to the board. As part of our 3-year agreement with Delta Dental, we have a 0% increase cap on the administrative service cost. So we are recommending $2.23 per contract per month, which is the same as it was for 2018 and 2019. So in summary, our recommendations to the board are to improve a 6.5% premium increase on the medical premium for 2020. Recommend the insurance fee of $11.72 per contract per month, and the administrative service fee of $38.70, and no change in the dental premium of $40.16 per month, and the administrative service fee of $2.23 per contract per month. And I'll stand for any questions if the committee members have any.
Thank you, Director Gutschall. Any questions? Doesn't look like it. Thank you, Director. Joe. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll move this along to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, the second item on, under the Finance and Budget Committee is Board Letter Number 19452, which is support for the Northeast Entrepreneur Fund in their NBEST Capital Campaign funding request. And I will move it, supported by Commissioner Boyle. Administrator Gray.
Thank you, Chair Olson. Commissioners, the action before the board is to authorize $200,000 in funding to support the capital campaign for the Entrepreneur Fund. The campaign is called the Invest Capital Campaign. We had a very good discussion overview, and I've had several internal meetings on this as well at the administrative staff levels. The Entrepreneur Fund has reached out and touched a lot of organizations and helped them in their efforts to start and grow businesses and to fill what I would call a niche market on the financing side. They also have a strong focus on a woman's business owners, and that's been part of their program focus through their Women's Business Alliance. I think we heard from the executive director that they've engaged in over 1,100 loans. They serve the region. They serve both the entire county with offices in 3 locations throughout St. Louis County. And this campaign is anticipated, if they can generate $2.5 million, of which a significant share would be from St. Louis County. That's estimated to leverage something in the range of 10 times that amount in terms of support to businesses and business owners as they establish or grow their businesses. The funding for this request will come from our General Economic Development Fund, and again, in the amount of $200,000. So the recommendation from administration and from our Planning and Community Development Director is to support this Invest Capital Campaign contribution of $200,000.
Thank you, Administrator Gray. Questions or comments? Commissioner Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Olson. Folks, I've been, you know my feelings on this, but I've been asking around. And currently we have some folks working on an economic development plan for both Hibbing, Chisholm, and Virginia, and they're going to be coming to us and requesting about $100,000. And we also, and Commissioner McDonald, I apologize, didn't have time to talk to you about this, but I got a call from your mayor of Ely thanking me for the work that got Ely and Winton together after how many years of civil war? And that sale of that property that was associated with the old landfill site. But while I was talking to him, I asked him about the Northeast Entrepreneur Fund. And his statement to me was, Commissioner, why not give the small cities a fund that they can work with, that they'll loan out, and they'll actually pay us interest and loan it out to small businesses to get moving on their main streets. So I'm asking us, we're putting $200,000 into a private business that, quite frankly, you can call them nonprofit, folks. The only thing that's nonprofit is the bottom line on the business. Everybody in the business is making money. That's going to be charging our residents 7, 8, 9, 10% interest. The only difference between them and a loan shark is that we're actually giving them the money. So I'm trying to figure out what we're up to, okay? And I keep going back to, well, we had this visioning session where we decided that the two biggest things were the mental health and drug issue and economic development. Okay, well, I was at that, okay? And I don't do dots and I don't do rankings and all the other things, because the truth is, every issue that comes in front of me is important. If it wasn't important, it wouldn't be here. And certainly, I can tell you this, it would have never had my vote on mental health and economic development as the two key areas, because I think for any of you that know me, there's not a chance that Road and Bridge wouldn't have been in the top 3, and we sure wouldn't have stopped at 2. So from now on, when we use that visioning session, well, I'd like another visioning session so that we can actually talk about everything. Because I'm not going to have it thrown in front of me again as somehow that was the grand decision made at that meeting. Wasn't it up in the bowling alley up in Hermantown or something? I don't even remember exactly where we were. It certainly wasn't a public meeting. At least there were no members of the public there, okay? So I have concerns on this. Madam Chair, if you want to move this without recommendation, I'll vote yes. Otherwise, I'm voting no. And quite frankly, over the course of the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be talking to these small cities up here and finding out, if we're going to give $200,000 to these loan sharks, then I'm going to be tagging on an amendment for $200,000 additional to start creating a revolving loan fund that these small communities can apply for, and they can loan it out and pay the county back plus interest. And by the way, Mayor Novak committed to about a 2% interest if he was to do it. The ones that are working with Virginia and Chisholm and Hibbing, each end of the range there's asking for $50,000, and they're committing to a very, very low interest loan program for existing businesses. Next, I will still oppose this, even if it's $200,000 to the entrepreneur fund and $200,000 to my small cities up north. I will still oppose this if we don't absolutely ensure that the recipients of these loans are educated as to where these dollars come from. I am not going to give money to a fund that is going to fund businesses that are going to spend the rest of their days fighting against timber and mining here in St. Louis County. They at least need to be aware that if they go out and get a loan, that the loan came from mining and timber money. And I'm sorry, you can have all your bent paddles and all your growlers you want down in Duluth, but when I see them standing up and opposing any time we put a shovel in the ground up here, which by the way we've been doing for over 100 years, when I see them opposing it, and then you're asking me to go down there and invest in those companies, my answer is no. But expect that I will be bringing back an amendment to this of a couple $100,000, because the fact is the majority of this is going to end up in downtown Duluth. And I'm going to be looking for an equal amount of money to come to northern St. Louis County. And I'm going to call northern St. Louis County right there at the Hermantown-Duluth line. Because I'm pretty sure that Commissioner Mussoff's got some small businesses in his district that support mining and support timber and would be very, very happy to get a loan through Proctor or through Hermantown that would be a low interest loan. Not gap funding that's making banks rich. If you don't think you're making bankers rich with this, you're confused. They take this money, they don't want to risk their money, so they'll take taxpayer money, put it into the business, and if the business succeeds, well, then we'll finance them, we'll give them full financing. But if it fails, folks, the bank doesn't have the risk. So, again, corporate greed. Because, folks, banks are not civic organizations. They're businesses. And they're big business. And they're the ones that are benefiting right here. If you think you're benefiting small business people, I'm sorry, in my opinion, you're confused. So expect that at the next one. Again, if it's moved without recommendation, I will vote yes at the time being. If it's not, I'll just vote no.
Commissioner Joel.
So, first, Commissioner Nelson, you regularly rewrite history, and admittedly, you don't like things in which people work together to collaborate. And so when we sat down in Hermantown and came up with a plan for what we would do, I suspect you didn't like it. But those of us who participated, and we came up with two important items for the county. And they were important as even Commissioner Rukavina said, who hated the process too, was something important for St. Louis County, and it was important for the small businesses and the people who weren't the mining companies, that they could get the resources they needed. The other thing you said last week and repeated again, and then you called the entrepreneur fund names. I was tempted to have a point of order just because I think it's inappropriate to kind of suggest that a business as well-known and as successful as the nonprofit entrepreneur fund is somehow a bad actor. And they're not, and there are multiple ways that what they do is overseen by the state, by the reports they have to provide, as I know from having run a nonprofit, in which you don't because you haven't. And I know how people look at the work they do. So it's not true. I mean, and when you tell non-truths and say them about people, it's particularly difficult. So I just want to say, you know, it's not okay to say those kind of things. And I know you would say that we need to say things about people, but you can say them in a decent way. So the other thing that I'd say is that the experience is, again, something you don't do, but I have done for almost 30 years, is invest in businesses, whether they're housing or small business, through things like the Entrepreneur Fund, through LISC. And I know from looking over their financials what they need. And they often need what we call gap financing. They also sometimes need the first person in, the company that's willing to take the risk, the greater risk, to jump in. And that has been very good for Hibbing, for Ely, recently up in Pike Lake at the biggest development that Kenosha has seen in years. You know, they make a difference. And we have businesses that are hiring regular people from our communities, and they're doing well. And while admittedly people may not always like
what different groups do. You've never heard us, who might have some concerns about copper nickel mining, saying we shouldn't support any business that supports copper nickel mining. That would be foolish on our part, and it's not part of the debate. The debate is that everybody in our region has a say, and they get to say it out loud. And we don't bully them into submission by refusing to give them money or refusing to support them because they have a different view than us. I'm not, and never have said that about copper nickel mining or the businesses that support them. I have no intention of that. I'm just stating my view, as some of those businesses are. And it's a terrible part of the present moment that if I don't agree with you or you don't agree with me, I'm going to be punished. And I'm not in favor of punishing people because they don't agree with me. So there are lots of people out there who do things that I might not agree with. And I still am very much in favor of them hiring people and starting businesses and helping our community be more vibrant.
Any other commissioners? Comments? Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Olson. Thank you for the business lesson, Commissioner Jewell.
You're welcome.
I would point out that calling them loan sharks and pointing out the amount of money that they charge in interest, which everyone has to admit, 8, 9, 10% interest in today's market is exorbitant. And that's what they're charging. It's high risk. I understand it's high risk. I would also point out that, look, private nonprofits do not compare with businesses. They're two different worlds, and that's just a reality. They're two different worlds. When we are investing taxpayer dollars, because that's what this is, derived from mining and timber dollars, we not only have a responsibility to those people that we are taking those resources and investing them in this fashion, but we have an absolute duty to make certain that it's clear to them that the dollars, where they come from. Now, I'm just simply adding on another piece that I think will make a great deal of sense for northern St. Louis County. And quite frankly, this is a piece that we've been talking about for an awfully long time. An awfully long time. And I apologize if I didn't indicate that I thought that the two things that we continue to talk about are important. They are. They are. Mental health, drug use in this county is costing us millions upon millions of dollars. Out-of-home placement alone, folks. But if we're going to look at what all is important to this county board, my goodness. You can't just say these are the two things we're focusing on, because we are not. At least I'm not. They are two things that we are focusing on, but does not make them the focus, and that's the only thing I'm pointing out. Commissioner Jewell, admittedly, you're a lot nicer than I am. I've never professed to be nice. Effective, yes. Nice, no. But I'll tell you, when I look at this, and I've seen what they've done to several small businesses in my area, I've seen what they've done to them. Because a business that I thought would have made it, I was 99% certain they would have made it in the restaurant business. But 2 years in, they hit the balloon from the Entrepreneurs Fund. And all they've done for that first 2 years is paid 8, 9% interest. That's all they've done. They haven't bought down the principal at all. And now the Entrepreneurs Fund says, nah, we're not going to stick with you any longer. We're gap funding. You got to go to a bank. And then they go to a bank, and the bank says, well, you know, here we sit 2 years in, and you're not making quite the money you were expected to make, and we're going to need to raise our interest rate to you in order to accept this risk. So now they take a bank loan that they had at 4.5. These are real numbers, by the way. 4.5. And the bank comes back to them and proposes 8% interest. 8%. Within 2 weeks, that business burned to the ground, folks. Those are the tragedies that I watch happen. And if I'm not going to talk about those here, then I don't belong here. So, again, expect that I'm going to be asking for an additional $200,000, and then I'll probably be begrudgingly supporting this. But I am still going to ask that they get an information paper that tells them where the money came from. I think that's reasonable. I think it's reasonable as all get up to tell them that right down the road here is a mine that they got some money from. Or just down the road the other way, there's a logging project going on that they got some money from. I think that's reasonable. That's called educating them. And if they don't want to be educated as to where the money is coming from, then I don't know that they should be getting the loan. And that's all I'm saying. So, again, I have no problem voting against this today and bringing back an amendment in a couple of weeks when we get back together. That's just where I sit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just a couple of things is that this Northeast Entrepreneur Fund came together 30 years ago or around there to help fill a need for small businesses across the entire St. Louis County, north and south. And we have 30 years of examples of success stories from them. Is it 100%? No, but there are true success stories of small businesses. I don't care what they do, north or south, but have helped where banks were not going to pick them up. These guys came in and made it work. And for every, like I say, every big business, I respect the heck out of them, but you know, our county, I think, foundation is off of small businesses, as across the entire country. It's a very unique fund that they have offices and have for 30 years up north, down south with employees. I think it's a really good quality run organization, and with that economic development that runs throughout our county. It's very unique. I don't know if there's another one like it in St. Louis County. As far as the amendment, I am absolutely supportive of our small towns, but you, commissioners, you also have to remember our small towns have levy authority, and their priority should be economic development, much like every other city in our nation. They can invest and collect money and then divvy it out to loans. I know the city of Duluth has done this for multiple years. I know other cities in our county have. That's the power of having a municipality and having leverage and levy authority. So I question whether we want to get involved with every city in our county regarding this when they have their own authority to be able to capture funding to be able to support these small businesses and set up their own economic development policies. You know, any way we can augment is fine, but you know, I think our cities in their own part have to be partners at the plate. So I will be supportive of this fund and look forward to voting on it. Thank you.
Well, I'll just say, you know, nonprofits are different than for-profits, and they are different for a reason. And And admittedly, Commissioner Nelson, you haven't had experience in them, and I have, and so you have experience with for-profit, and I have something else. Those nonprofits have been effective in meeting needs in the community that were otherwise not met. I, like Commissioner Boyle, see this as a remarkably effective proposition that came into being after the horrible downturn of the 80s, and a way to support people in these communities. And it's done in a way that provides something people couldn't otherwise get. The other thing I'd like to say is, you know, if we want to fund those businesses up north, we ought to get that chunk of money back from the mining companies that was given away some years ago and could easily be reinvested. And you're the one, without any conversation, told Senator Bach that you thought it was okay if they took that from us. Well, let's get it back. Maybe you can talk to him and assure that the money comes back to us, because we haven't been getting all that money from the mining companies for years. And the fact is, it doesn't actually touch all of our communities the same. It touches some communities up north in ways that it never touches communities in the southern part of this. So we could debate this forever, but the important thing is small business are getting the help they need from the Entrepreneur Fund, have been for 30 years. They have a 1% loss rate. That's a really, really good business.
Commissioner Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Olson. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, excuse me, just for 1 second, Commissioner Nelson, I'm sorry. We're in the committee of the whole, right? So, Commissioner Nelson.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure, because we have a 2 bites of the apple rule, but I know we're in committee of the whole, so I just want to take a second to think that through. Go ahead.
Okay. There's no 2 bites at the apple in committee of the whole, I hope. Okay.
That's actually what I just said, so yeah, go ahead.
Anyhow, Commissioner Jewell, thank you for bringing that up. Because, you know, there's many members of this board that haven't been educated on that. That money that Senator Bach moved at that point in time, which was, by the way, agreed to by myself, Commissioner Forsman, and Commissioner Rocker. We all told him it was a good idea. But we don't write laws, they do. He wrote it into the law. But the fact of the matter is that the communities of Aurora, Hoyt Lakes, and Bawabik, you know, for all of these years, they've been told by everybody, you have to build your schools, you have to get all of this stuff ready, because when PolyMed opens, you have to be ready with a school. You have to be ready with law enforcement and housing. And 18 years later, the environmental wackos are still suing every time they apply for a permit for anything. There's a lawsuit, and then there's a lawsuit tacked on top of the lawsuit. So yes, that money was moved. And it was moved to support the communities from whence it came. From right here, where it came from. Where the property taxes were taken from. And it supported that school over there. It's also a great deal of the money that's supporting the consolidation of Evelyn, Virginia, and Gilbert. It also supported the Mountain Iron School. It supported the Northridge School. Because again, those dollars that we're supposed to be getting in here from economic development have been crippled by groups that, quite frankly, either don't care or don't understand about the economy of northeastern Minnesota. So thank you for bringing that up, because I'm glad I could point that out to commissioners that weren't here when that occurred. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I got a question for administration. Now off of this too, the other significant part was this $200,000 captures. How much, can you clarify that again for me? How much on the state and the feds off of grants?
Chair Olson, commissioners, the representation, and there's a series of events that build up to the total working capital or lending capital goal, but it's approximately 10 times. So somewhere between $20 and $25 million is what the executive director shared with us. And administration didn't bring this forward to stir a lot of controversy. And the intent here is to look at an established organization that has a track record, to be responsive to one of our focus areas. And I absolutely agree with Commissioner Nelson that we, and I think this whole board does, that we have other priority needs and areas as well. But one of the things that the direction that I feel this board has provided and administration has taken the lead on is to be more targeted and broaden our economic development presence, but in a responsible, complementary way. This seems to fit that niche, if you will, where we can make a difference. I very much look forward to hearing more about a loan fund that might be talked about at the city level, and I'd encourage that entity or those groups to talk to us. I think that might be another example. I'm hesitant to mix and mingle without knowing all the details, and we were afforded the opportunity to have a workshop discussion on this, which I think was really revealing and helpful to all of us. The fact that the Entrepreneur Fund has been recognized as Rural Lender of the Year by Minnesota, its track record, its span across the entire county were the things that appealed to us administratively in bringing this forward. Again, not intending at all to create controversy or to discredit anybody or to discredit the entrepreneurial fund for that matter. So again, administration's perspective on this as we look at targeting selected finite dollars that would benefit the most people. We've really increased our participation in abatements, which have a finite amount and a finite term, much preferred to TIF. I think there's general consensus on the board that that's a good mechanism. And I know that in the early part of the coming year, Deputy Administrator Fritzinger and myself would like to bring forth and have a more comprehensive discussion around economic development in a workshop setting. Timing-wise, this is somewhat critical to the campaign, and with their working capital, as was discussed with the board, at a point where this infusion is needed to sustain the fund and its efforts. We continue to believe that this is a good, modest, but effective investment that will enhance economic development across the entire county. And so with that, I would just reinforce that we were very mindful of the amount and vetted this organization pretty extensively and its track record, and these resources we think will benefit the county and are consistent with our strategic plan, which is why we brought it forward.
Thank you, Administrator Gray. Did you have any other questions, Commissioner Boyle, that answered?
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, Commissioner Nelson?
Madam Chair, some information that I think we should get before, so we're fully aware of what the Entrepreneur Fund is doing. I'd like to see their balance sheet. They have to submit it to the feds, so they already have it. I'm not asking for the sun, the moon, and the stars. I want to see their balance sheet. I want to know how many loans they have out there and what the total of all of those loans is. And I assume their loans, they're getting paid back. They only lose 1%. This fund should have all kinds of money. But I'd like to see exactly how that's working out. Or if the payroll of 17 or 18 people is gobbling up the vast majority of the funds that are being distributed through this fund. So I think that's a legitimate question that I would like administration and our finance chair to certainly pull together in the next couple of weeks. And again, I'm only asking for the report they have to give the federal government. So they don't have to produce anything or make anything.
Commissioner Joel.
So just so we're clear, so if a resolution moves forward or an amendment comes forward to give money to the cities in northern St. Louis County, we would expect the same from them. So a balance sheet with all of their tax revenue, et cetera, will be brought forward, along with information as to how much this will raise, what it will be used for, the amount that the loans will be given, et cetera. So those are going to be important pieces for Commissioner Nelson's amendment, and without them, I don't think we can consider it.
Okay, I'm seeing no other hands or any other comments. I have a few things that I would like to add to the conversation. One of the things, there's a couple of things that I thought were really important about the Northeast Entrepreneur Fund that made them people that we would, organization that we'd want to invest in and to support in the work that they do. The first is that they work throughout the entire county. So we have offices throughout the entire county where there are people living and working and in those communities that are helping those communities. That focus on they focus on rural areas, and they focus on areas where they are hit hardest by they said it themselves, they're hit hardest by the large declines. So basically when there's the up and down of big business, they're there to support the small businesses to see that through. And they provide a lot of support to those businesses. They do have a women's center where they have a focus on women-owned businesses, so they're helping to create some parity and business development. And I think the biggest thing that hasn't been talked about here is the amount of support that they provide to businesses. They help them come up with business plans, they help them access money where they're not able to access money, or they would not be able to access money probably without their support. They've helped many businesses expand, so not only new businesses start, but successful businesses grow and provide, have a bigger economic impact on our community. They provide visioning and work with partners and other organizations and other economic development authorities to leverage all the resources to bring them together to support whole regions, whole neighborhoods, whole cities. And those are all really important things. And so that is something that requires people, so they need to have staff in order to do the work of helping people write business plans and helping people to expand their business and to set up their HR and to set up their finances and to work with the banks to get as much funding by the banks as possible, which is what we were told in our workshop last week, and that then they take on the riskier aspects of the business or the gap funding for the loans that people would not be able to get from banks. So there's an aspect to the business that is really about support for our region beyond the loaning of money that I just wanted to bring up that we haven't talked about here today. I'm fully in support of this resolution. I'm not interested in moving it without recommendation. I think we need to think really critically about a revolving loan fund that we would give out to cities based on Commissioner Boyle's points of that they have their own economic development authority, they have the ability to do this themselves. Is that the right place for the county to be in? And I think when we're talking about economic development, we have to think about the right place for the county versus the right place for the city versus the right place for nonprofits or other organizations that are working to promote economic development. And I see this $200,000 investment that will be, which many other people, private people are investing in. I mean, many other people are investing in this fund. to add up to the amount of money that will then become a significant, much more money to be able to give out. And so I think it's a small contribution actually to an overall large amount of money that we're able to participate in. I would also like to take a couple minutes to speak about the strategic priorities that were set. I was not on the board when those strategic priorities were set. If there's a need to create new strategic priorities, I say we have another session with new members of the board and we get together and have that conversation. And those things are important whenever you're strategizing around business, government, nonprofit, planning, anything. You can't focus on everything all the time. We do have to pay attention to and focus and respond to every aspect of the county, and I think all of the commissioners understand that that is our role. But it is important to be strategic and have some focus areas that you're concentrating on, whatever you're doing, whatever you're planning. Even in your individual planning, you have focus areas that you focus on. If you think of your own financial planning, you do that. And so it makes sense to have strategic priorities. And if these are no longer the will of the board to have these, then maybe we should change them. But for now, they are. And so I think they're important to keep in mind and to mention, and they're not fluff or something silly. They're very, very important to the process that we do. So I will be supporting this. And I guess for the future, when I am the one that is running the meeting, so when this is my committee, I will expect that there will be, that people will speak without calling names. So I'm going to expect this of everybody here. So words like environmental wacko will no longer, I will interrupt at the point when things like that are said. I think that is not appropriate for civil public discourse, and I don't want it anywhere in the committee that I'm running. So I'm just going to say that just for me to remember and for everyone else to remember that I will be cutting off at that point when those things are said, or making note that they get changed. Any other comments before we move it to a vote? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. Back to you.
Thank
Chair
you.
Boyle.
Next up, we have Central Management and Intergovernmental, Commissioner Musoff.
Thank you, Chair Boyle. Two items on the agenda today, being first letter number 19-453, appointment of election judges for the county absentee and the Uniform and Overseas Citizen Absentee Voting Act, ballot boards. I will move this along. Do we have a second? Seeing a second, Administrator Gray will frame this.
Thank you, Chair Musoff and Commissioners. The action before the board is to identify election judges, as was noted by the chair. These are staff people, and I have it from the clerk of the board that he'll vouch for them individually and collectively. And really, this is a big effort by our team there between Lisa, Jonathan, Wendy, and Brenda. And we have a lot going on. And of course, the increased use of absentee ballots, the increase in appropriate investment on reaching out to citizens overseas and to our military makes this an even bigger role. So kudos to the auditor's office for their great team there, and this is a formal process that is required for the board to appoint these individuals as judges.
Thank you, Administrator Gray. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, we'll move it to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Second piece on the agenda is letter number 19-454, appointment of alternative member to the Civil Service Commission. I will move this along. Do we have a second?
Second.
Having a second, Administrator Gray, will you frame this one up for us?
Thank you, Chair Musoff. Commissioners, the action before the board, as noted, was to appoint a member, an alternate member, to the Civil Service Commission. As you know, St. Louis County is one of the bastions of civil service still remaining in the state. This commission is very important to our efforts for a lot of reasons on the human resource front. We have been operating without an alternate, and that makes, at times, achieving a quorum a very difficult endeavor. And when you have time-critical and mission-critical issues that are going to the commission, we want to make sure that we round out the board. So I believe Ms. Waltenberg has some prior background in the commission, which makes this very appealing. She understands the process and has a really good understanding of the role. So with that, the recommendation from Human Resources and Administration is the appointment of Julie Waltenberg as an alternate member of the Civil Service Commission for a 3-year term ending November 4th, 2022.
Okay, thank you, Administrator Gray. Questions or discussion from the board? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Back to you, Chair Boyle.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next up is Environment and Natural Resources, Commissioner Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Boyle, I have but one item in front of you, in front of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. It is to approve the use of online auction of state tax forfeited properties. I would move it. Is there support?
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Administrator Gray, could you please frame this issue?
Thank you, Chair Nelson. Commissioners, the action before the board is twofold, but the broad request is to approve the selected parcels, urban and rural, for a pilot online auction, and to approve prohibited purchaser conditions, which gives the Land Department and the auditor the ability to adjust pricing and to periodically adjust those prices on the online auction. I really do want Land Commissioner Weber to talk a little bit about this online auction, since it's a pilot project. I really appreciate the encouragement of a number of commissioners and support as we continue to look for more aggressive, innovative, and alternative ways to sell properties and get our tax forfeited parcels back on the tax rolls or conveyed to an appropriate organization or entity. This is something that Land Commissioner Weber has been working on for some time, and I think he should tell us a little bit more about it and how it's going to work. And as we've tried different mechanisms through advertising, through auctions, through the use of Zillow, through the use of sales agents and others, this is yet, to coin an oft-used phrase, another tool in the toolbox for getting lands back on the tax roll. So with your permission, Chair Nelson, I'd have Land Commissioner Weber talk a little bit more about this for the benefit of the board.
Thank you, Administrator Gray. Land Commissioner Weber, please come forward.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, thank you. Back in 2017, there was a change in legislation, Minnesota Statute 282, that allowed us to sell tax forfeited land via online auctions. And we've been looking at this over the last couple of years, trying to see how this might work. And with the help of the purchasing department and a software package that they use to sell surplus county equipment, we think we have a mechanism to give this a try. And that's all we're asking for at this point, is to explore selling tax forfeited parcels on an online auction. There are many benefits to this. It will improve the efficiency. We won't have to publish these books we have are very informational, but they are expensive, and it will reduce the cost of some of the publications that we have that advertise these parcels. A parcel could conceivably stay on sale, or the sale will run continuously, and a parcel could run, say, 30 days, and if there's no interest, what we're asking is that the board automatically allows us to make a price adjustment and just kick it back in and allow it to continue running for sale. So the parcels that we have selected, again, this is a pilot. They run the gamut of all the parcels we're dealing with, the good and the bad, the small and the larger parcels, urban and rural. And we just want to get a feel for how this, if this will be successful or not. And we're hopeful, we're excited that it will be successful, but unless we try, we won't know. So it's a logical next step. You know, we're always looking for continual improvement. And so we're looking for support to give the online auction a trial. It will not replace all public auctions, I don't believe. I think there's always going to be that always serves a purpose. But again, we'd just like to give it a try.
Thank you. And Commissioner Weber, questions at this point? Concerns? I'm sorry, Commissioner McConnell.
Commissioner Weber, when you're looking at these properties, how did you come about picking the ones that are on the online auction list? Because I know I'll get asked that question.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, so we had one of our staff who's very knowledgeable about all the parcels because she's either visited them or been working with them over the years. They've all been to public auction once already, so they're on an available list. And again, we tried to select parcels that represent the tax forfeited lands that we are offering for sale. Again, larger parcels, smaller parcels, rural, urban, the good ones and the not so good ones. So we're testing the waters on all these different types of parcels that normally would be offered at public auction.
Because it looks like a cross section is what it is.
That's the best way to describe it. Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Commissioners, I've had extensive conversation with Line Commissioner Weber on this being in my committee. As a pilot, I support this. And I have to tell you that 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have. But we've had enough movement in terms of internet access throughout St. Louis County, whether that's via satellite or somehow, so that I don't believe any portion of our county is necessarily going to be cut off from this type of auction. The fact that we pick sites that have previously been to auction, we're not statutorily required to put these back up to auction again. We could just simply leave them in the book. So really what this is a marketing plan more than it is following a statutory process that requires us, one, to put them up on a public auction before you can list them in the booklet. So I'm a little concerned when I look down the list and I see it advertised as Swamp Large adjoining, or Lakeshore Large questionable access. You know, those aren't words that typically inspire buyers, okay? But hopefully when we throw it out there, it's a marketing tool, and I'll live with it because, quite frankly, there are a lot of absentee landowners in St. Louis County. There are a lot of people in this nation that are looking at investing in parcels, properties. Our land values are very low. They are. They make them, they look attractive to other areas just because they're quite frankly low when you comparatively speaking. So I look forward to seeing the results from this. I still have some concerns about where we're going to head with it, but again, with the access to internet, pretty much maybe not high speed, but folks, these auctions aren't exactly going to be high speed neither. So I think there's going to be it's going to be accessible to everyone. I do think that we should, as an alternative to this, and I thought about it afterwards, offer up our land department sites at our various locations as locations where people could go if they want, if they do not have access to internet, that they could go to one of our land department buildings, wherever that may be, Ely and Cook and Virginia, Pike Lake, downtown Duluth, so that if they so chose, they essentially could attend the online auction at a county office. And I think we should make sure that we offer that out there just so that we do not disenfranchise anyone, because that'd be the last thing I would want to do on this. Commissioners, any comments or questions of Mark at this point? One more point.
Mr. Chair, we have to discuss that. That's a very good idea. Also, we'll clean up that language, as you said. And what I feel like what you brought up also was the fact that this does provide a much larger audience to look at these. And someone in Chicago could could look at the website or look at the application and may be interested. So thank you.
And Land Commissioner Weber and Commissioners, when we invested in our GIS parcel overlay 10 years ago, thereabouts, maybe even a little bit more than that, that investment is, I know it's over $10-12 million now. It's got to be more than that. But we envisioned the fact that with that tool, we would be able to market our lands to corporations, to individuals that didn't necessarily have to drive to St. Louis County to look at it and find where it was. So this is just the natural evolution. Administrator Gray.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Chair Nelson. I know Dana's going to include this in our weekly recap of articles that relate to the county, but there was just an outstanding complimentary article about the county's GIS system, or the land portal, in the Mesaba Daily News. And while it's an editorial letter, it was just very positive and I thought pretty thorough. And we'll make a point to circulate that article to the entire board, in addition to, of course, sharing with our staff through our Dana's weekly update. But that lawn portal investment, I think, began probably close to 14, 15 years ago. And there were a few people around. There's still a couple left, I think. But if I had, I won't use my favorite go-to phrase of if I had $1 for every time somebody said something positive about this. But that land portal has been incredibly popular with our residents and our visitors. And we are acknowledged to be head of many counties, and not only in this state, but nationally. And so the foresight of a group of department heads and a board back then, I think that investment continues to pay dividends. I kind of think of this online access as an electronic over-the-counter system to a certain degree, and I'm sure we'll embrace the suggestion to help people that aren't so proficient on or don't have access to internet to participate in this too, and encourage people to always look at our over-the-counter offerings, because that's another thing that we're trying to market broadly. But the other point that the Land Commissioner, Deputy Administrator Fritzinger, made sure was that this has been to an auction. Maybe in the future it'll change. We'll have some revisions to that, but this has been to a site-based auction already. So I think that essentially that they've been seen before, been published, and this is now a great opportunity to see if we can harness some, attract some more activity towards getting these parcels back on the tax rolls. So thanks for your leadership on this, Mark. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Administrator Gray. And please, when we're talking about, Dana, when we're talking about that land portal, let's make certain that we make that disclaimer that the yellow lines are not accurate. They are intended to be a guide, because I think every commissioner here, at least the ones out in rural areas, have been jumped on the yellow lines. So please, let's try and keep that disclaimer in every piece that we do on them, just so people understand. They're generally reflective of the property boundaries, but they are not necessarily based on survey. And they're getting better. Every year they're getting better, but they're still not based on survey. With that, seeing no further discussion, everyone in favor of this signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back to you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Commissioner discussion on items and reports. Commissioner Nelson.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to break from tradition here, but I will alter my language to environmental extremists, because they are environmental extremists. Even though they're, in my opinion, still wacko, they'll be environmental extremists from here on out. And we have extremists on the other side of that cycle, too. We have people that quite frankly, don't care about our environment, and those are extremists that don't care about it. But, Mr. Chair, I will be bringing forward, so that the board does not indicate that it's a surprise, I will be bringing forward the resolution on the moratorium on the introduction of services into St. Louis County at our next board meeting, committee of the whole. I plan on reintroducing essentially the same resolution that I introduced some months back. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Other commissioners? Commissioner McDonald.
Thank you, Chair Boyle. Just for everybody's information, yesterday, and I know Dana's received information on this, the DAV has now, will now have a vehicle for veterans to travel to appointments that will be located in Ely. We've had a number of people throughout my tenure and before that have had extreme difficulty getting rides to appointments, whether they be in Virginia or Duluth, down at the VA, whatever it happens to be. So that was a very nice ceremony we had yesterday, passing over the keys. We do have 3 drivers as of now, and we are putting together a campaign to get a few more drivers, and it is an extensive process to get federally certified to transport. So good shot in the arm for veterans in the northern part of St. Louis County, and we look forward to providing that service.
Other commissioners? Seeing none, the only item I have is the record 57-inch catch and release record in Minnesota for the muskie. It was done in the great 4th District in Lake Vermilion. The only bad news is it was caught by a guy from Iowa. I was expecting Commissioner Musoff to be that guy doing it, but we got a southern guy, so it was the only bummer. Seeing that, move to adjourn. Moved by Commissioner Jewell, second by Commissioner Musoff. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Quite the story behind that fish as well.
Yeah. It's right up there with Big Ten.